Top stories is how South Sudan's government urges opposition forces to halt fighting, and the Democratic mayor of Minneapolis optimistic about his conversation with Trump. Good afternoon. South Sudan's government has urged opposition forces to halt fighting, saying a rebel advance and ongoing clashes that have already caused mass displacement in Jonglei state threatened to reignite civil war. According to the United Nations, the clashes pitted government forces against fighters loyal to the Sudan People's Liberation Army in opposition are occurring at a scale not seen since 2017. The government said its forces had repelled rebel advances in Jonglei, which stretches from the border with Ethiopia to central South Sudan. Meanwhile, the UN has expressed concern over a senior military leader's utterances to troops as they prepare for deployment to opposition areas. Tabiso Lehoko has more.
The UN says it is gravely concerned after a senior military leader in South Sudan urged these troops to, quote, spare no one, including children, the elderly and civilians when they are deployed to opposition-held areas of the country. It has labelled the comments as utterly abhorrent and called for an immediate end to it. South Sudan's Deputy Army Chief, General Johnson Oluni, made the call as he addressed his Agulek militia as they prepared to be sent to parts of Jonglei state. The government said this was not an order.
The Executive Director for the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, Lawson Naidoo, says Parliament's ad hoc committee investigating allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system is not functioning as it should because of political interests. Naidoo says he is concerned that the committee is acting in a partisan manner. He was responding to questions about the position the committee would find itself if private investigator Paul O'Sullivan continues to refuse to appear in person before it. Naidoo says in light of what's been said about O'Sullivan, it's vital that he appears and explain the role he played within the criminal justice system. Meanwhile, O'Sullivan has indicated that should he testify, he won't engage with members of the EFF, Action SA and MKP, but Naidoo has accused some parties of political grandstanding.
We're seeing very different lines of questioning from the different political parties, who clearly have vested political interests in pursuing some witnesses and not others. So it's quite clear that the committee, this is very much political grandstanding by members of the committee. And the O'Sullivan case, I think, highlights that to a certain extent. And we saw that again recently, a week or so ago, with the testimony of Robert McBride as well as with other witnesses.
A coordinated national disaster relief response following widespread flooding and fires affecting multiple provinces across South Africa has been mobilized. The team include the South African Women in Dialogue, the Council of Churches, non-governmental organization, human rights defenders and the private sector. The member of the coordinating team for the national disaster relief efforts, Advocate Thando Ngubeni, says there are drop-off centers in the Gauteng province for those who wish to donate goods.
We decided to come together to put together a humanitarian relief initiative where we are collecting non-perishable foods. We are collecting clothing, men, women, children and baby clothing. We're collecting diapers, baby formula. We're collecting toiletries, sanitary dignity and hygiene products, and bottled water, as well as basic first aid kits.
Meanwhile, SA Women in Dialogue says the items collected will be transported to various provinces as and when the need arises or once weekly. Advocate Ngubeni explains how people can reach them.
So what people can do to get the exact information and details is to where to drop off, because our information is constantly being updated and being upgraded as we have more drop-off centers expanding. Is if you can please go and check our social media, go to the South African Women in Dialogue or SAWID, and you can go and check the nearest drop-off zone for you.
And finally, the Democratic mayor of Minneapolis in the U.S., Jacob Frey, says he's held a positive conversation with President Donald Trump and asked him to end the ongoing operation of federal agents against undocumented immigrants. Trump himself praised the conversation and said there had been progress. It's widely reported that the figurehead of the mass deportation, Dr. George Gregory Bovino, who vilified the nurse Alex Preti after his agent shot him dead, will soon leave the city. The BBC's Peter Bose has the story.
After weeks of angry protests over the presence and tactics of immigration agents in Minneapolis, the federal government appears to be pulling back. 2 members of the public, both US citizens, have been killed by immigration agents, and the streets are still tense. But the heated exchanges between local politicians and Trump administration officials have subsided. But now Mr. Bovino and some of his agents are to leave Minneapolis, and the tone from the administration has changed.
Recapping the top story, the South Sudan's government has urged opposition forces to halt fighting, saying a rebel advance and ongoing clashes that have already caused mass displacement in Jonglei State threatened to reignite civil war. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Thami Ngubeni is set to rake in a lot of cash after Al Ittihad move. And Standard Chartered has penned a huge deal with Formula One. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It's gone exactly 7 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Thank you to Jwalani Tulongwepe and Figile Lingwati. Here's what we've got in store for you on Africa in Business on this Tuesday, the 27th of January. Thami Ngubeni coming to you live from Johannesburg, South Africa. This is Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Coming up this hour, really good news coming out of Zimbabwe as it records a single-digit inflation for the first time in nearly 3 decades. We'll look at the factors affecting this disinflation, and major sub-Saharan economies are projected to grow between 3.2% and 4.6% in 2026. We'll take a look at the Ex-Firm economics report. It's exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Welcome to it.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
We begin here this afternoon with Africa's role in the global financial system once again under the spotlight, and this is with the launch of the African Credit Rating Association, ACRA. The Pan-African initiative aims to strengthen the continent's credit ecosystem by reshaping how African economies are assessed, financed and understood, ultimately influencing borrowing costs and improving access to finance for African countries and African businesses. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa attended the launch and filed this report.
Delegates engaged in high-level dialogue on redefining Africa's credit future, focusing on transparency, credibility and homegrown solutions that reflect Africa's economic realities. Sifiso Falala, president of the African Credit Rating Association, or ACRA, says this is the right moment for Africa to establish its own credit rating body to help address long-standing gaps in the continent's financial sector.
If you look at the global economics and the way African countries have started to grow and started to overcome their structural problems economically, as well as the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area, everything seems to point to the fact that Africa needs to take the initiative and begin to build institutions and assets within the continent that will help it to grow. So the moment is very opportune because we believe that African economies should be growing at a faster rate than previously.
But what role do African governments, investors and institutions need to play to ensure the success of this initiative?
Certainly, having 33 countries in junk status or uninvestable does not help any government in any part of the continent. And that situation will be part of their legacy because someone has to change that. And Accra has a significant role to play because come to think of it, the credit ratings, they should not benefit only external investors or investors in general. They should also benefit the sovereigns and the issuers of credit instruments so that they themselves can improve. So the exclusive monopoly view where only investors are supposed to benefit from credit ratings is something that Accra would like to have challenged and people to think and write about it.
Zwelibanzi Mazia, Chief Operating Officer at Sovereign Africa Ratings, says engagements with and recognition from South Africa's National Treasury would go a long way in supporting the work and development of Accra.
What that would mean for Accra, I think it's firstly recognition. That is important and it goes a long way. And the reason is that once you have a good relationship with a national level stakeholders such as the National Treasury, it becomes much easier to engage with corporates, financial institutions, domestically. And this, I'm speaking about this from the perspective of Sovereign Africa Ratings itself. We solicited a rating in Zanzibar as well as Tanzania. And what this does is it makes the conversations much easier to engage when you are dealing with corporates.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo kutulibwanji ndi
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
It is exactly 13 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. The Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, has amended the rules related to the expiry of mobile data bundles. From the 23rd of January next year, South Africa's telecommunications companies will be required to allow consumers to roll over unused mobile data bundles. ICASA gazetted the new regulations on Friday that provide for at least one rollover on the same terms as the original bundle to the benefit of consumers. We'll bring you this story in just a moment's time. It certainly is good news for many data users in South Africa, but we'll get the details of that in just a moment. For now, let's turn our attention to Zimbabwe, where the country has recorded a single-digit inflation rate for the first time in nearly 3 decades, with official data showing year-on-year inflation easing to 4.1% in January of 2026, and this is down sharply from 15% in December of 2025. The Finance Minister, Thami Ngubeni, has described the development as a critical milestone on the path to durable macroeconomic stability. He attributes the sharp disinflation to sustained coordination between the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, as well as the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, citing tighter fiscal discipline and consistent monetary reforms as key drivers of the turnaround. Joining us this afternoon to dissect this dramatic move and the disinflation in Zimbabwe is Zimbabwean economist and Managing Director at Bullion Group International, Persistence Ngwanyanya. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the program.
What is your reaction to Zimbabwe recording a single-digit inflation rate, especially because this is the first time in 3 decades? There are many in Zimbabwe who've never seen an inflation rate this low.
It is a milestone indeed that we have recorded single-digit inflation for the last almost a decade, 3 decades now. But what is more important is this is coming as a result of the prudent monetary policies that we have been pursuing as a country, but also the fiscal consolidation at Treasury and the coordination of the two.
And
what is also important is over a year or so now, for more than a year or so now, the environment has been stabilizing, and we are more concerned about permanent stability, entrenched stability. Now, with the numbers, January numbers coming, you may want to agree with me that permanent or stability is entrenching and permanent stability is achievable.
So how significant is this sharp drop in inflation from 15% in December to 4.1% in January? And I also want to just pick up on the issue of sustainability, which you brought up. This is only one cycle. Is there a sense and a confidence that this is something that's maintainable? Is this a genuine turn towards a new trajectory for Zimbabwe?
For a country that experienced hyperinflation in the past, the return to single-digit inflation is a key milestone for this country. Because normally when you experience hyperinflation, volatilities become a structural issue, confidence become a structural issue that weighs down on stability. So you dealing with the past, you carrying the burden of the past, and you also having to deal with the present. So you may want to agree with me that we were in a very difficult situation as a country, but that notwithstanding, we have managed, and this only reflects the disciplined fiscal and monetary policies, and these are just the fruits of the same.
And I'd like us, if we could, so just break down and maybe go into greater details about those very specific policy measures that were most critical in pushing Zimbabwe's inflation into the single digits.
As regards, I didn't quite hear, but as regards sustainability of the disinflation path, yes, it is very difficult. But with the commitment that we're seeing on the ground, I think it is achievable. And the generality should also contend with some measure of trade-off. It's not an easy path, but it just requires the ordinary Zimbabweans to also sacrifice. It comes with some sacrifices, as the stability we have been experiencing has also come with some measure of monetary tightening.
Oh, I did hear that line drop. Are you still with us, Persistence? Looks like Persistence Ngwanyanya no longer with us. I did hear that line dropping, however. And as he was talking about the ordinary Zimbabwean and a measure of sacrifice that's needed there, I really wanted to talk to him about the situation on the ground, whether this has actually filtered down to the ordinary Zimbabwean, and how much more do they really have to sacrifice after decades of being in an environment that was characterized by hyperinflation. If we do get Persistence Ngwanyanya back on the line, we'll continue that conversation with him and maybe also find out how it's impacting the Zimbabwe gold currency, the ZiG, and if it would meaningfully strengthen that. It's 20 minutes after 4 p.m.
Let's just do it.
Your life just got easier. Get the Channel Africa app and take us wherever you go. Catch the latest news, enjoy your favorite shows, stream the music you love, and stay connected to the continent. All in one spot, right in your pocket. Simple, quick, and always with you. The Channel Africa app. Download it now on iOS and Android.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is 22 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Let's move on to the Small Business Growth Index, SBGI. It reveals that South Africa's small businesses are entering 2026 with cautious optimism. Around 59% of SMEs expect moderate to strong growth over the next 12 months, while 92% plan to expand locally. 72% plan to expand nationally, and 45% aim to explore export opportunities. Additionally, 67% are looking to strengthen their online presence. For more on this, we joined on the line by Vinesh Subramani, Interim Managing Executive of SME Business at Absa Business Banking. A very good afternoon to you, Vinesh. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. Thanks for having me, and good afternoon to all of our viewers.
Great. Let's start off with an understanding and an overview of South Africa's small business outlook for 2026 and some of the findings of the Small Business Growth Index.
Thanks so much for highlighting those key salient points that came out of the index. Maybe a little bit of background to the index itself, Thami. Last year, as ABSA and as the Bank of the Entrepreneur, we felt that there was a gap in the data that we have around a real-time indication of how the SME sector in South Africa is doing overall, the health of the sector, what is the outlook of small business from a confidence perspective, how they're feeling, as well as the overall sentiment. And so the beginning of last year, we partnered with the South African Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Bureau of Market Research, to develop what is today known as the SBGI, or the Small Business Growth Index, which is really, to a large extent, a first of its kind within the South African context. That gives us a real-time view of those 3 sort of dimensions I spoke about earlier. When we ran, we do this twice a year. So we ran it in the beginning of last year, and we had published the first report around the end of H1. And then towards the end of the year, we ran the second, the wave, and we published an updated report. So we do this twice a year. We're also building somewhat of a trend so that we can see how this is trailing over time. What the index has shown us towards the end of last year is that as SMEs go into 2026, they're going out with a higher level of confidence. But to your point exactly, it is cautious optimism. Is it outright confidence? Not necessarily. What they're saying is that they are optimistic, but they still do need support going into 2026. What we've seen is that there are a lot of green shoots in our economy at the moment. You think about 200 plus days without load shedding. You think about the interest rates that we find ourselves, at the moment, whether it be the Rand, US dollar rates, etc. There are a lot of green shoots in the economy that will help SMEs this year. But what the index is also clearly telling us is that SMEs are still saying we do need support as we look forward, and we have a responsibility to support them.
And on that very note, it noted that 90% of the businesses that you surveyed intend to expand their businesses. You spoke to that a moment ago. But there is still the consistent problem of a lack of access to financing. How will they be able to grow their market without adequate financial support?
It's such a crucial point, probably even more crucial for South African businesses. As you've mentioned, the index has shown us that approximately 70% of small businesses will require funding in the first half of this year. When we spoke, I have the privilege of speaking to a lot of small businesses. I spent the better part of last year engaging with a lot of small business owners all over the country. Previously, there was this level of conservatism. Not necessarily being willing to take on that finance to do that expansion or, bulk up my fleet or buy equipment or, even use funding for working capital. What we're seeing now is that there's a definite need to say, we're feeling better about, the outlook, and so we're going to need funding to help us. Access to funding is also an outcome of a strong relationship with your financial partner. And what we're seeing more and more is that this need to have keep your financial institution, or more specifically your banking partner, your banking institution, very close to you in those financial decisions that you want to make, as opposed to trying to solve for it yourself. What I've seen as well in engaging with lots of businesses, and South African businesses specifically, is that South African entrepreneurs are very resourceful and they try and solve, the problems that they face on their own. I was sitting with a client last week where I said, she took me through her business journey and, she's built a great business. At some point I was saying, but it feels like you think you need to do this on your own. Whereas we are here to support you. And so keeping that relationship really sound and keeping them part and parcel of that financial decision helps in the funding process, because businesses can't do it on their own.
No, certainly they cannot. It really is a whole entire ecosystem that feeds off each other. And talking about that, the index shows that when we look at the survival rate, 38% of the businesses surveyed believed that they could survive for more than a year under cost pressures without external support. Conversely, then, I think it means 62%. What did they say? That they can survive or will not be able to survive? What were the results there? And also, if you could talk to us about how these businesses aim to ensure their survival.
So there are two elements to this, Thami. One is that, a good majority of the businesses are saying that they're looking at moderate to strong growth. About 68% looking at moderate to strong growth going into 2026. There is still a fair share that are saying, in order for us to survive, we're going to need help. And that help takes the form of not just financial support, but non-financial support as well. Often access to finance is a big element that we must, work on in the South African context, but the non-financial support elements are just as important. If I can use a couple of examples, one is this piece around mentoring, coaching, through the relevant enterprise development programs, but also elements like creating access to markets, being able to digitize your business, your products and solutions, meeting your customers where they are, not just being able to showcase your products and solutions digitally, but also being able to accept payment for those products and solutions. So we're seeing the shift towards about 2/3 of businesses are saying, I have to create a digital online presence, but I must also be able to do that by accepting payments digitally. That's the second. The other element is around infrastructure concerns. So when we think about load shedding and we think about, this 200+ days without the issue of load shedding, which has put small businesses, in a lot of pressure over the recent years, that concern has now shifted to water security. And with a lot of the businesses that we're engaged in, we also see that business owners, and particularly small business owners, are starting to think about water just the way they thought about electricity a few years ago, and thinking about backup systems and storage and supply. The last element is around the support from a sector perspective. We put SMEs under one umbrella and we think we kind of treat all of them the same way. Depending on the sector that you find yourself within, that there are nuances that, the SMEs face. It's really important to have sector specialists, trade specialists from the banking, from your financial partner, from your financial institution, actually help you and guide you with those nuances that you're faced with within those specific sectors, whether it be, transport and logistics or trade or whatever it may be. So that sector's expertise is also really, really important. And that support is available for small businesses.
Vinesh Subramani, we thank you so much for your insight and the amazing support that Absa Bank is bringing to small businesses and impacting and influencing their growth as well. We thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Thami. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That's Vinesh Subramani. He is the Interim Managing Executive of SME Business at Absa Business Banking. Thank you, sir. He takes us to exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African Time as we head over now to the markets desk for the latest market indicators with Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. In your indicators this hour, $1 is trading at 16.03 in South Africa, and Botswana is trading at 13.39. In Namibia, it is trading at 16 Namibian dollars 03. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 19 kwacha 52 the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 127 shilling 855. In Ethiopia, it is trading at 155 bureau 1. In Uganda, it is trading at 3,000 shilling 511. In Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 537. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,412 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 46 Egyptian pound 95. In Tunisia, it is trading at 2 dinar 85. In Algeria, it is trading at 128 dinar 80. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 8 dirham 96. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,157 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,087 and platinum at $2,683 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $65.44 a barrel. Now, for any stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here is Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good afternoon, Thami. We kick off with football news. South African attacker Thami Ngubeni has completed a move to another African giant in a record-breaking transfer. A 32-year-old has been unveiled by Libyan giants Al Ittihad SC. According to reports in North Africa, the Libyan giants paid Wydad $1.5 million to secure Lodge's services. According to Ballerman Sport, Lodge revealed that his departure from the Red Castle was just a matter of time, as he had a prior understanding with the club president Hisham Ait Merna. The decision to leave was made due to an agreement between the club and the player, which followed a lucrative offer from Al Ittihad. Paris Saint-Germain, PSG, has confirmed the signing of teenage talent Dro Fernandes from Barcelona with the Calatan. Giants president Joan Laporta left upset over what he said was an unpleasant situation. Barca chief Laporta explained Dro had previously agreed a new deal with the Catalan Giants, but decided to depart instead. In a statement, PSG says they are delighted to announce the signing of Dro Fernandes. PSG did not state how much they paid for Dro, but Spanish media reported they spent slightly more than $6 million prize release clause as a goodwill gesture, citing a figure of $8,100,000. Dro, who is from Galicia in Spain's northwest, joined Barcelona's La Masia Youth Academy, considered the best in the world in 2022, and made 8 appearances for the club. Earlier in January, Barca coach Hansi Flick showed his disappointment at Dro's decision to leave. And Richards Bay Football Club. Coach Ronnie Gabriel says his team has been active during the January transfer window, strengthening the squad with several additions across the pitch. Defender Tembelani Skakane, formerly of Amazulu, joined the club as a free agent and was already included in the matchday squad against Welele FC. The club has also secured Kenyan international winger Vincent Oburu from Zesco United, added versatile defender and midfielder Tuli Nashikwa from African Stars, and brought in Sabelo Khatebe on loan from Kaizer Chiefs. Gabriel outlines that the new recruits will be phased into action as they build match fitness ahead of the second round of the season.
Tembela, he was in a match day 20 today, so his documents, his card was ready for today. The other two, we just wait for the documents, and then at training they're showing good signs, and we're hopeful that they're going to add an impact into the team going to the second round.
On to motor racing. Standard Chartered has penned a deal with Formula One to become the motorsports wealth management and investment banking partner. The City of London headquartered firm will be involved with Formula One as part of a multi-year deal with Standard Chartered's branding set to feature trackside. The bank's chief of corporate and investment banking, Roberto Huonwerg, says Formula One's footprint reflects their own cross-border network with their presence in 19 out of 21 F1 race markets and many other countries where clients enjoy watching one of the most exciting, fastest growing sports in the world. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you to Nosipho Zuma and Figile Ngwati. They take us back to 37 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. You'll remember just before we went to the economics desk and before we spoke to APSA on the Small Business Index, we were having a conversation with Zimbabwean economist and managing director of Billion Group International, Persistence Ngwanyana, around the incredible disinflation that's taking place in Zimbabwe right now. In December of 2025, inflation was sitting at 15%. In January of 2026, just 1 month later, it's sitting at 4.1%. And we did cut off, so we are going to continue our conversation. Thank you so much for making time for us once again, Persistence.
Thank you for having me on the program.
That's awesome. There are two things that I really wanted to ask you and just get clarity on. You were speaking about the sacrifice that the average Zimbabwean has to make. So has this inflation and these figures actually reflected in their living experience? And how are households reacting to this? Are they still feeling the pressure from the cost of living? And what type of sacrifice were you referring to that they would need to be making? Are you with us, Persistence? All right.
Hello?
Okay. Are you still with us, sir?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay, lovely. Would you like me to repeat my question or did you hear it?
Yes, you can repeat.
Lovely. I was wanting to find out from you, you mentioned that the average Zimbabwean needs to make a sacrifice in order to ensure that there is sustainability of this disinflation. And I wanted to find out from you whether the ordinary Zimbabwean's lived experience has been impacted and influenced by this decline in inflation, and what type of sacrifice are you talking about that households then need to be making?
So inflation, as it is all over the world, is largely commonly described as a monetary phenomena. More so in our situation where we experienced excessive money supply growth, driving price and exchange rate volatilities. So now what we have seen is the authorities have clamped down on monetary expansion significantly. So what that also means is the economic activities tend to slow down. But even the other...
Mr. Ngwanyanya, apologies. We are going to have to leave that conversation there. Our line very compromised. But we thank you once again for making time and rejoining us. It was an attempt made, not too successful, but made nonetheless. It's exactly 4:40 p.m.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Now, Oxford Economics Africa Watchlist 2026 indicates that the continent will continue to experience economic expansion this year, though growth will vary significantly across countries. Major sub-Saharan economies are projected to grow between 3.2 and 4.6%. Trade tensions are expected to persist, with Chinese exports to Africa potentially rising as Beijing seeks alternative markets due to reduced access to the United States. For more on this, we joined on the line by Jacques Nal, who is head of Africa Macro at Oxford Economics. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Thami. Thanks for the invitation.
Lovely. So you forecasted that African economies to moderate growth trajectory in 2026. There's going to be growth ranging from 3.2 to 4.6% for major sub-Saharan economies, according to the report. What will be the key drivers of this economic growth? And where specifically in Africa are these expected to happen? Which regions or countries?
Yes, that is quite a wide range, but I think firstly it's important to note that despite all the negative recent headlines in recent months, the external environment has actually improved quite a bit in recent months, and especially when compared to a few years ago. So recent commodity price dynamics have really benefited the continent, with mineral prices surging, oil prices slumping. So most African countries have seen a big boost to their terms of trade. A weaker dollar is of course great for the continent. It makes it a lot easier to pay or repay your external debt. A weaker dollar and lower oil prices is of course beneficial to contain inflation, which is a perennial problem on the continent. And lower inflation has facilitated lower interest rates, not just on the continent or in most countries, but in the US as well. And this is of course really good for growth. In terms of which countries, in Southern Africa, the major commodity exporters, so Zambia and DRC, Zambia a major copper exporter, DRC copper and cobalt, they are expected to see really good years this year. Just last week, we saw S&P improve the DRC's outlook on its sovereign credit rating. Some of that was due to some fiscal reforms, but a lot of that was due to the outlook for mineral receipts. But just sort of generally speaking, we see the best growth on the continent in East Africa this year. In Uganda, we just saw the presidential elections wrap up. It looks like there won't be too much trouble there, and Uganda is expected to produce its first oil this year. That will be a significant boost to growth. In Ethiopia, they've implemented some pretty tough reforms in recent years, some IMF-backed reforms, and now we're finally starting to see some of those fruits. So there we expect strong growth. Rwanda has been one of the strongest growing economies for some time now on the continent, and we expect that to continue this year. They're benefiting somewhat from mineral exports, but just a sort of a general expansion of basic and modern services in the economy. And then just finally, Kenya. It looks like Kenya is moving past its pretty severe fiscal troubles that it had recently. We expect it to clinch an IMF deal this year, hopefully sooner rather than later, and that would sort of just be the confirmation that the economy is moving beyond its fiscal troubles and that its outlook has improved.
You did mention, Jacques, the impact of the United States, the weaker dollar, etc. And we are seeing these geopolitical tensions continuing and very much impacting trade as well. As Oxford, you've highlighted that there could be a potential surge in Chinese exports to Africa in response to the US trade wars, and as those continue. Can you give us your insights on the prospects for Africa's trade with China, with the EU, as well as the United States in the year ahead? And also perhaps how trade diversification strategies will accelerate economic resilience?
Yes, I think the really interesting dynamic to keep an eye on there is China. So just for some context, last year already, between the first and the third quarter, Chinese exports to Africa already rose by around 30% year on year, and the trade surplus with Africa increased by nearly 80%. So Africa is clearly going to play an important role in China's diversification efforts away from the US. There's also some concern regarding the nature of trade between Africa and China, because nearly 90% of African exports to China is in the form of raw materials, while roughly 50% of imports from China are manufactured high-valued goods. So the thing is that China is clearly doubling down on its exports growth strategy because it's got some pretty severe economic troubles at home. Its consumer base isn't picking up the way it wants to. Its property sector is still in big trouble. So what we think is going to play out this year is that the surge in exports, especially manufactured goods, is going to put a lot of pressure on African industrialization efforts, even more so than in the past, just because of this renewed focus from China on Africa. But given that it's China, we think that it's unlikely that we would see aggressive sort of tariff or quotas being put in place by African nations, just considering the importance of China from a trade, a credit, an investment perspective. So on the upside, what we could see is that a lot of African nations sort of refocus their industrial policy on encouraging FDI, perhaps in special economic zones, to sort of curtail some of the more pressing infrastructure needs on the continent, like energy transport, where they sort of just focus their efforts on specific zones and get industrialization going through that, just because now they sort of have to, because now China, and I don't want to use the word dumping because of the negative connotation, but China's focus on Africa, that might require more industrialization efforts from the continent's part. And then, of course, there's the Africa Free Trade Agreement. This could prove to be that boost that the agreement really needs to get up off the ground if, Africa can trade more, look towards other African markets, because it's unlikely that they'll be able to compete with China, given the goods that China is producing on the manufactured front. So maybe this could be the boost that the Africa Free Trade Agreement needs.
Jacques, debt stress continues to be a major challenge for countries on the continent. It's also something that was highlighted in the report. What key debt-related challenges should policymakers, investors, as well as businesses be monitoring this year?
Well, as I mentioned, there's a lot of good news. So a weaker dollar makes it a lot easier to repay your debt, and interest rates are lower than recent years, and they are expected to drop further. So, and a lot of the other factors that I mentioned are sort of conducive to markets looking at African sovereign debt. So a weaker dollar makes other currencies a bit more attractive. Lower yields in advanced economies make the pretty high yields for African sovereign debt also look a lot more attractive. And many investors may be thinking that maybe advanced economy stock markets and commodities like gold might be looking a little bit frothy, and they might not want to put their money there now and rather look for some decent yields elsewhere. So my point here is that the external environment has improved quite a lot, and it's going to be a lot easier for African governments to issue debt now. So some of those fiscal concerns could be sidelined. And that is a real risk if sort of the focus on getting the fiscal house in order dissipates and there's free money, or not free money, relatively cheap money available again. We could see some of the gains made recently on fiscal reforms, engagement with the IMF, a lot of those being backtracked. So I think that is a real risk. Something to keep an eye on is those economies that have implemented major reforms. So here I'm thinking about Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Egypt. Are they going to keep those in place? Or are they going to stay on that track? That would be a positive. And then just countries that have improved their collaboration with the IMF. So again, Ethiopia, Egypt, Ghana, are they going to remain engaged? And that would then sort of be a positive sign to investors that they are not going back into their old ways, and that the fiscal situation should improve going forward.
Thank you very much, Jacques. We'll leave it at that for this afternoon, but a really comprehensive report there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Jacques Nell, Head of Africa Macro at Oxford Economics. There's something else that we didn't quite manage to touch on because of time, and that is the currency adjustments that are likely to be made in the coming year. Last year, 2025, we did see countries like Botswana and Libya devaluing their currencies. The report also flagged potential devaluations in 2026. So it really is worth a read. It's the Oxford Economics Africa Watch List 2026. You can just go onto their site to take a look at that and go into greater detail. It's exactly 4:50 Central African Time.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
In about 9 minutes' time, we hand out our gloves as Africa in Business and usher in Vue d'Afrique with Joël. Bonjour, madame.
Bonjour, Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa sur Vue d'Afrique tout à l'heure. Il sera question notamment du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Antonio Guterres, qui met en garde contre le remplacement de l'état de droit mondial par la loi de la jungle. Nous parlerons également de la nouvelle société civile congolaise qui s'inquiète face à la vague d'arrestations visant des opposants en RDC, mais aussi dans la deuxième partie de Vue d'Afrique avec Jolino Sungu en sport. Il s'agira notamment du football. La FIFA dévoile les montants à gagner pour la Coupe féminine des champions. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's well coming up at the top of the hour with Vue d'Afrique.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. As the sun rises on 2026, Channel Africa celebrates with you. This year, may prosperity flow like water. May unity strengthen our nations. And may every African story inspire the world.
Channel Afrique vous accompagne dans cette célébration. Que l'espoir illumine notre continent.
Que as vozes de África ecoem com orgulho.
Ustawi na ufanisi na vitiririke kama maji.
From all of us at Channel Africa, we wish you and yours a joyful, successful, and prosperous 2026.
Channel Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It has gone exactly 4:52 Central African Time, and in this week's Standard Bank slot, we look at South Africa's festive season spending data. Yes, it's out. We'll also look ahead to the 2026 outlook trends and payment solutions. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Norman Nyawo, Head of Merchant Solutions at Business and Commercial Banking for Standard Bank South Africa. A very good afternoon to you, sir. Welcome.
Thami, it's a pleasure to be here on your platform again.
Well, we know everybody was spending throughout the festive season. What we didn't know was just how much. And so the numbers are finally out. What do they say as far as the 2025 festive season trade results and consumer confidence and spending patterns in South Africa?
Yeah, so I think the December trading numbers were quite interesting. We noticed double-digit growth in turnover, which is quite indicative of customers really going out and spending. We saw that usually, customers really going to some of the usual holiday spots. So we saw quite an increase in turnover in Cape Town and KZN, which is obviously expected. But I think the spend patterns were very much in line with what we anticipated. And I think this is probably coming off the back of, some of the relief that we saw during the year. The interest rates coming down late, which I think gave a very good boost and encouraged customers to go out and spend a little bit on themselves.
I mean, you did mention double-digit growth, but perhaps it's spread out a little bit more and look at how this consumer spending supported businesses. If you could just unpack this for us, and this is specifically at the end of December and the end of that trading period, perhaps some insights and data that you as Standard Bank have seen on card acquiring values as well as volumes.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think I'll start with maybe some of the regional splits. So as I said, we saw the majority of the highest increase in spend come in the Cape Town area. So we saw about 25% year-on-year growth there, so which is expected. KZN area, we saw 14% increase in turnover spend there. And when you look at some of the sectors in a bit more detail, the retail sector, especially clothing, that was up about 15% year-on-year. And we also saw the entertainment and T&E space also up 10% year-on-year. So again, as I said, it really just does reinforce that during that festive season, we anticipate that some of those sectors are going to get, a significant amount of volume and traffic, which is good. But interesting enough as well, something that we've been talking a lot throughout the year is, we're seeing an increase in e-commerce and digital traffic. We saw about 40% increase across, coming in those e-commerce channels, which is quite encouraging as we anticipate even going into 2026, more customers starting to use these new digital e-commerce rails.
And grocery stores saw a 23% year-on-year increase in turnover. And if we look at food and convenience stores, those grew by around 12%. What does this say about consumer priorities during the festive season?
Yeah, I mean, during the festive, definitely, it's celebratory mood. People are out there, making sure that their families are fed. And, we've got a lot of, diasporans as well who are, making big purchases and sending food home and family. So it's quite expected that those sectors are going to receive a lot of attention. So nothing out of the ordinary in that sense. But as I said, I think the tourism and entertainment sector did see, quite an increase, which is expected as well. So I think it bodes well for consumers in 2026. Hopefully, I think with some of the cuts that we're seeing, the rate cuts continue, and if the spending patterns continue going on into some of the festive periods we're expecting in Easter, we're looking forward to also an increase in some of that spend across the channel.
So as we wrap up, could you unpack what Standard Bank sees trends shaping payments in 2026? And it was quite interesting when we spoke about e-commerce and the volumes growing there as well. And maybe just a comment from you on how businesses should respond to that in this year, and just developments and how businesses and consumers are going to be impacted in this year of 2026.
Yeah, so I think some of the trends that we foresee coming in, as I mentioned, we're likely seeing the increase of e-commerce and that growth is going to continue. But, as we're going into 2026 as well, there's going to be a lot of talk around alternative payment channels, which means that we're starting to see, the use of the cell phone come in. Standard Bank has built a platform-based solution called Simply Blue, where merchants can download it and they can actually start transacting quite quickly. So, the proliferation of these simple to use applications is what we're really starting to see expand in the market. So I think really what we encourage some of the businesses and traders to do is get access to some of these solutions like a Simply Blue, so you can enable yourself to participate, in these sectors, and you can get some of these tools that during these festive periods and when there's peak traffic, you are able to reach your target market, and you can actually get a share of some of the high traffic and volumes that's going around in the ecosystem.
Norman Nyawo, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking us through that 2025 festive season spending, as well as what to look forward to in the year 2026 as far as trends are concerned. Thank you for your time, sir.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. He's head of Merchant Solutions at Business and Commercial Banking for Standard Bank South Africa. That's how we come to the end of our time together as Africa in Business. This has been your Tuesday edition with myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the team. We hand the reins over now to Vue d'Afrique, where the Joels are standing by for the rest of the day. Restez connectés.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world.